Greetings, Ranger fans. Jake here for another edition of Database Rangers Power Reviews, where we take a look back on our classic episodes of Database Rangers Power Reviews as we count down the 100 weeks to the 100th and final episode. Welcome to everyone already in the chat. Welcome Sean, welcome Rudy, welcome Jenny, welcome Nightwing Josh, welcome Chris. Good to see you all. Happy Friday. It's hard to believe we are on week 75, only 25 more weeks to go. Which means I have 25 weeks in which to produce 4 more episodes. That is terrifying, not gonna lie, that is terrifying. But we march forward. Fortunately, a pretty good chunk of that time is going to be during the summer break, so that is promising. But yeah, it's gonna be a tight run to the end. I have a lot of work ahead of me. Speaking of which, in good news, my computer is back. I have reinstalled Premiere. I've been editing. Finally, knock on wood. Hopefully it will stay this way, knock on wood. The primary hard drive died, so we had to do a data recovery, get a new hard drive, and then also the RAM board died, this being the other RAM board. The first RAM board was what died in November. This time the other RAM board died. So that was also a process, along with just a lot of communication issues with the IT people and with the computer repair people, unfortunately. But yeah, it is tricky. It has been tough trying to get the ball rolling on 97, but I have filmed 7 hours of footage in the last 3 days, and I've just been powering through editing that. So there's just a lot of work ahead of me, but at least I'm making progress again. Which I really hadn't been able to do for about 2.5 weeks. I'm still finishing getting a few things set up, which is why there's no thumbnail tonight. But I need to do some shuffling around with a few things, and then I should be able to get things rolling again with the various thumbnails, as well as releasing the deeper look and rapid run through. Returning this Sunday. Although this mention of thumbnails reminds me I still need to install a few more programs. Specifically Adobe Illustrator, which is what I generally use for creating my thumbnails. So, is the computer working better than before? It's hard to say. It's working, which is better than it's not working. It does seem to be starting up a little bit more reliably. I haven't had any major issues, with the exception of stuff just taking some time to find how to reinstall a few things that have been on the computer for years and years. So that's been a little challenging. I'm still finishing transferring a few files, so there's still a few things that are getting referenced that aren't there, and there's a few bits of messiness. But I have my desktop back, and it is functional, and knocking on all the wood that it stays that way. Because I have a tremendous amount of work ahead of me. At this point, I think it's looking pretty likely that 97 is probably going to be closer to the end of May than the beginning. Provided I can still hit that goal of May. With the plan for 99 and 100 to come out in July and August, when I have the most time to work, and then October for the final episode. So it's going to be complete and utter madness racing to the end, because these are going to be some of the longest, biggest, most ambitious episodes I've ever attempted, and I'm going to be trying to basically put them together in a month apiece, which is not not reasonable. Not something that's going to lead to a lot of sleep. There will not be much sleep over these next 25 weeks. I'm telling you that right now. Anyway, so all that wrapped up. Uh, we will be having the deeper looks and rapid run throughs back this Sunday, and they will probably be running through, and I believe they'll be running through to the end of May. Um, and the last weekend of that will probably be very close to the release of 97 is my current expectation. I still have more things to film, a lot of stuff to edit, so I'm not even close to being done on 97 right now, but I'm making rapid progress. So much stuff. I have my neck is actually sore from the Phantom helmet digging in uh, during filming. Um, it gives you an idea of just how much filming I've been doing with the Phantom helmet. Anyway, let's get into what we're here for, and before we do, let's always remember our 3 equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Black lives matter. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Fascism is bad. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Superheroes are fun. So let's check out our favorite superhero turned supervillain. 1, Mr. Database Ranger. In episode 75 of Database Ranger's Power Reviews, our review of Power Rangers Super Megaforce episode 15. All hail Prince Vekar.
Previously on Power Review.
Here we go. And this is also just sort of highlighting a few elements of Database and his previous encounters with Alphabet Soup and how things have been functioning up until this point. Because it's easy to forget sometimes, I think, that Database is an artificial life form, and that's what leaves him vulnerable to infection by Vengeance. And then that episode. That's just 74 is just such a standout episode. And here we have the return of the R agents, R alpha and R beta. And that was a nice, smooth compositing bit, considering I had to open the door on them, so there was a little bit of garbage matting I had to do there.
Let me explain something to you. The others, I've handed to you on a silver platter. Got them alone, earned their trust, even did those little reviews the Database loves to do. And get this, one of those reviews involved someone under the influence of a potion.
And I love
involved people in wacky disguises, and a third
I love him just
switching minds, and not once did any of them suspect that anything was wrong. In fact, I had the coup de grace, Dr. K, the one person on this pathetic plane of existence who understands the wireless interdimensional interface. Not right now.
I love the wireless interdimensional interface always chiming in whenever it's mentioned by full name. This is Database just doing a great, unhinged villain rant, and it's so fun.
She escaped! Because you fools had to go and let her counterpart squeeze out a distress signal. Now we're not only down one genius, but also one portal alignment device. Just count yourself lucky that I managed to sever her connection to this universe, or else she could have popped back here like that and threw a monkey wrench into all of our plans. Now, you tell me something.
I have way too much fun playing the villain.
Get that signal out! Well, that's just perfect. You know, I know you two are supposed to be my handlers or whatever, but I'm seriously starting to
Rachel is also just, as I've said before, has been such a reliable, was such a reliable person to work with throughout all this.
Well, tough luck, because I don't answer to you. I answer to the secretary.
And I hadn't even really intended for the R agents to be recurring to this extent. until I got to this episode, and I'm like, oh, I need him to be interacting with Alphabet Soup agents. I would like for it to further development of some of the previous Alphabet Soup agents, and the most prominent ones were the R agents there with the H agents. Also, Rachel was such a good sport throughout all this, because keep in mind, throughout this review, every time that you see two of her, that's a composite shot. So every time we had to do basically any shot, we're doing it twice. So that's a lot of patience. I know that. I know that obviously Marissa tends to have, or MJ tends to have much more challenging composite shots because there's the whole costume switch. But this was just amusing because it was the entire episode. And once again, Dave was another great sport because he's not even in this episode, and he lent us his car specifically so we could still be filming in a Prius.
So Emma, the Pink Ranger, suggests that they celebrate with a picnic because obviously just what the kids need is another picnic.
Yeah, I saw the wait what and the what.
They take the sky ship out for a spin.
Not sure what that's referring to.
Hesitant at first, he quickly relents once Jake points out that it will let them deal with trouble that much faster if an emergency pops up.
Doesn't that negate the point of the day off? Please try not to think about it.
Now back with the Armada, Vekar is planning to pilot the new Megazord himself against Emerson's advice because he's still sore over his brother Brock being Daddy's favorite.
It is a shame that Vekar's character development basically all ended up happening in this one episode. Although he was a pretty enjoyable villain during his run, in terms of his just complete wackiness. There's a lot of issues with Super Megaforce, but Vekar's characterization is not really one of them for me. He's just a fountain of nonsense.
I imagine that Troy likes having them there so he can intimidate them. The water bottles, I mean, not his team.
Troy does hate water
And
bottles.
of course, just as they all settle into a sense of security, balanced precariously on the bow of a giant pirate ship hundreds of feet in the air, Argus and the exports and bruisers immediately start shooting them from below. Now you might think that this would be the part where they all fall off the ship to their inevitable demise, right?
My composite job here on the car isn't as strong as I'd like it to be, and this is one of those things where if you know what to look for, you can see what the issue is, because the way that it's...
You have no idea what our names are.
Don't tell me. Agents R and R again. So while the others...
It was a nice little reference to him pretending to be Agent R again back in the summer season of year one. But one of the issues here is that certain lines I perform with an agent on one side versus an agent on the other side, and I always need to trim around that agent's shoulder depending on who it is. And there's actually little bits of shadow on the ceiling when we're inside the car. And this has always been a challenge when I need to do compositing with characters inside the car. The shadow play on the ceiling is always tricky, and I need to try to blend it, and I don't always do a great job of that. Like, that one looks fine, but because the light is constantly shifting because we're outside, other times you might see a seam if you look behind one of the agents' heads. Oh, a T and H coming back? Oh, we'll see. Right now they've been kind of indisposed. Okay, and it was Scott's odd comment. Okay.
To form the legendary Blue Rex Megazord, which, surprise, surprise, proves to be no more effective than two separate Megazords would have been, and is soon taken down by the Armada Megazord's galactic strike, forcing Troy to eject his 5 teammates. Of course, that didn't prevent them from doing just that.
But yeah, if you see there, on the right side, you can actually follow the seam as I kind of tried to blend it with the ceiling there, and you can kind of see, oh, it's fine at the window, but then there's a little cut across the seat. I try and hide those seams as best I can, but every now and again, especially when dealing with natural lighting, never try to do compositing with natural lighting. You can even see there's the shadows fading in and out. My compositing on that in the car scenes, I tried to generalize it because the shots were always the same, but there were just a bunch of different shadow issues. And then this shooting inside the elevator was also just kind of hilarious because there was just so little room for the actual camera. I think I had to shoot my scenes, my shots separately because there wasn't room for them and the camera with me on the other side for it to all fit comfortably, if I recall correctly.
You said he risked himself. It's not like he died or anything. You even told us he survived the crash. Please try not to open this.
And then having these two interact is always a matter of just trying to time the lines just so. So a lot of times I'll be reading the lines for an R agent, so that the other R agent will be able to time accordingly. Alright, so which one's alpha and which one is beta? So when it comes to R alpha versus R beta, R alpha is... Okay, the one that just asked unmorphed, I'm fairly certain that one's R beta. And the thing with that is, R alpha is the one that's been with Alphabet Soup longer. R beta was the one that got recruited by R alpha. R beta is the one that's native to this universe. And R beta tends to be sort of the rookie of the two. Whereas R alpha is usually a little bit more sarcastic. It's very subtle. And truth be told, I wasn't really thinking about which one was which at the start of things, because I hadn't really intended to develop the character as much as I ended up doing. Or the characters. Oh, we got a little ad pop up there. There it goes. But Rachel always wanted to do a really good job whenever performing for me, and kept asking me like follow-up questions, like and thinking things through in terms of, okay, would our alpha be delivering the line this way versus that way for our beta, and just that she just has that sort of level of professionalism, and was always a little self-conscious because she's usually more of a theater tech than a performer. But I kind of roped her into this where it was just like, oh, I need you for this one episode 60, because Dave's wife Caitlin couldn't make a return appearance after me showing her in episode at the beginning of episode 59, and then in this episode I'm like, oh, I could use another agent. You know who would be great to work with? I'll bring Rachel back in. And that was one of the reasons that I had her in episode 70, Driving the More Potsners, because I wanted to have her for this episode, and wanted to kind of bring her back for a little check-in to remind people that she exists. Oh. I don't know if RJ is going to be into Power Rangers. We'll have to see.
Convinced the destruction of Argus and Prince Vekar had left the Armada leaderless. Completely unaware.
Yeah, R Beta ended up just becoming like the default agent of the series, for a lot of stuff.
What did you think?
Well, I swear, it's like I don't even know you anymore. What? Some of the things, good action, nice dates. anything about these characters. How could you possibly?
I love having
You both make good
R Alpha and R Beta debate things with each other. It's so much fun. Dave's wife showed up in the very beginning of episode 59 when we had agents marching down the hallway.
This is somewhat subverted later by them simply once again.
She has codename Agent Hugh. Because I let her pick which letter she wanted.
But the big thing that keeps this episode from being great is the lack of strong relationships to establish character investment. One of the major set pieces here was the duel between Noah and
But
Arthur.
I
Two characters that
really
only
do
friends
actually
prior to this episode.
retroactively like this episode more than I realized, in large part because I enjoy the interplay between Database and the two R agents. I kind of wanted this episode to sort of show his transition into being a part of Alphabet Soup, and now this being his new social circle as a villain.
Also a totally valid interpretation of events, and one that keeps the interaction from being totally hollow. But either way, I think we can all agree on who the real.
But R Beta, I'm almost certain was the one who I had written as liking as liking the episode All Hail Prince Vekar. I'd need to double check my scripts, but I'm fairly confident that it's that's R Beta. Let me actually, you know what? I bet I can look up the script pretty quick.
His actions have simply been to gain the approval of the dismissive royal parent. As a result, his defeat almost feels less like a victory for the Rangers and more like a tragedy for him. Overall, this episode might not quite have the gravitas it aspires to, largely
Welcome,
due to
Athena.
yet another contrived heroic victory and the lack of strong.
We're nearing the conclusion.
But it does provide an action-packed and fitting farewell to our lead bad, setting the stage for the final events of the season and reminding us all of one thing that is incredibly important.
What's that?
No matter how thoroughly a villain may think he's defeated the heroes, no matter how assured his victory may seem, if he's foolish enough to let them slip through his fingers, it can all come tumbling
But
down like that.
you can see how Rachel really did make an effort to put in these little subtle differences between the two agents.
This organization runs off abductions and brainwashing.
And yes, I'm double checking the script, and it was R Beta who liked everything.
What do you think?
I think it's time that they return to their duties. Yes, Madam Secretary.
You know, I think I liked you better when I thought you were just a receptionist.
That reminds me. How's your book deal coming along?
Very funny.
Can't work at a place called Alphabet Soup without a sense of humor. Come with me.
And here we finally got Shelby back. We were going to have her back in episode 70, but it just didn't quite work out that way.
Agent Dark can brief you on that later. We have more important matters to discuss first.
More important than the security.
After I had originally set her up all the way back in episode 33.
Infinitely more valuable to accomplishing our goals.
Sounds like you've got everything all figured out. What do you need me for?
You've encountered the subject before.
One thing I will admit
Fill in some of the gaps.
is
Let me guess.
I always am kind of frustrated with how my walk and talk bits end up coming across, because I don't have the moving camera function. It's always on the tripod, and so it's really just kind of doing these loops over and over again. It just, from a filming perspective, I recognize it's not as dynamic and it doesn't quite look right.
Here we are. I believe you've already met Dr. C.
Hey, Dr. C.
Yes, you're the fellow that pointed the gun at me last year. You look well. You lost weight.
Doctor.
Oh, yes, of course.
And I love his line about you asking if Database lost weight, because Database was wearing all the pillows in the suit before.
Exactly what happened. I was in my laboratory. It's not even really sure how I got there, but that's been known to happen. Suddenly, the subject just fell out of thin air. In very bad shape, too. Looked like he had been hit by a car.
And here we go.
Evil thing. May I speak to him? Yes, of course.
Just don't expect him to say much.
I do so enjoy this bit, this shot. Oh, we had there's an error on there, and I forgot about that error at the end. There's just a weird scaling error for that final shot. Although I do love the "I look forward to working with you," line. I forgot that thing went out with that error at the very end with the scaling. It's been a while since I've seen this one. Ooh. But I do love that we had this whole setup with the lab, and it was very dark, and it just kind of worked with the lighting. For reference, that lab, that's just like a hallway. It's just a hallway where we turned off the light switch, and there happened to be an emergency light, and I'm like, oh, I like this lighting. Oh, I'm gonna work with this. That's actually, I believe, the same hallway from back in the Summer Saga from year one, where Database would fall out of the air vent and then ran into Guy, and he was like, Guy, what? It's that same hallway. It's just with the light turned off. And then, oh no, Rudy, Dr. C is, I love Dr. C. I love writing things for Dr. C. He's just a blast to write for. But yes, Nightwing Josh, our beta is the version from the Power Reviews universe, not the Power Rangers universe. Our alpha is from the mainline Power Rangers universe, and our beta is from the Power Reviews universe. And then there are no soup agents from the RPM universe or the Dino Charge universe. But yeah, and you're right that it does. You can tell that it's the character of our beta once you get to know our beta better later in the series. But yeah, that whole lab, I borrowed a gurney from the playhouse, from our college playhouse, and I just like looked around for like random sciencey things, and if I recall correctly, I think I grabbed like the same like metal cabinet that I used for Jungle Karma Pizza, so I wasn't looking closely enough, but I'm gonna just try rewinding a little bit to see. Whoop! I didn't mean to. Yep. So the random little science thing that's just next to, just in between T Omega and Dr. C, that's a random panini press that I found. That is literally a panini press that's just supposed to be there for science. So apparently that is how Dr. C has been conducting experiments using a panini press. But yeah, this was great because it was filmed during that winter break, when Tom briefly came back to town after he had moved away that summer. So this was filmed along with a bunch of other stuff for the year 2 finale all at once during that winter break. So what happened to the original secretary? Oh, if you watch closely on episode 95, there you do briefly see the original secretary. In real life, she moved away, but she was in cryo with the other agents. And you will notice that the current secretary has a very visceral reaction regarding her. When she gets taken with the others. So there is a definitive link between the two secretaries. That you can pick up on if you're reading in the context. It will be made more explicit later, but if you haven't picked up on it yet, there is a link between the two secretaries. But yeah, it really came down to the original secretary had a kid. Time went by, moved away. It was just it wasn't practical to continue trying to film with her at that time. But yeah, it's wild just like how time has passed. Like, that kid's in school now. That kid who was not even conceived when she did the cameo appearance in episode 33, is now in school. In elementary school. That's so crazy to me. Well, the implication is that there might be more penalties than that, but at the very least, she was placed on ice with the others. Now, as far as if there would be any more penalty, obviously circumstances for the soup have changed across the course of them of their departure into the rift. So whether she'll be facing any additional consequences or anything like that, a little up in the air. But yes, that is why she's no longer the secretary. But yeah, I had intended to sort of carry through on that character of the secretary originally. But I have been enjoying working with the new secretary, who's also just a good friend. It's been interesting always playing around with how much people's lives have changed across the course of this series. Like so many people, their circumstances are just completely different than what they were when the show started. Mine included. Obviously, you know, I was just living with the person I was dating at the beginning of this, and now we are married with a kid and looking for a house. Like, I was a knife salesman at the beginning of this. Now I'm a teacher with like 5 years of experience teaching, plus an extra 2 years experience tutoring, master's degree. Like, so much about life has just completely different from where it was when we were filming this. And even during the course of year 2, everybody's lives were changing. Justin and Sarah got their house. Dave moved. Tom moved. Shelby had a kid. Oh, how was my Passover? We had a nice time. Went down to visit my family for the Seders. MJ got to meet with a few friends down there. And since then, I've just been trucking along with you know, the no leavened goods, which is, you know, mild inconvenience, but not too bad. We got plenty of matzah in the house. All the knives have been sold to happy families. Yes, yes. Do I plan on making a video of the DRPR timeline? I hadn't planned on that, actually. I feel like there's enough of a general discussion of what's going on in the timeline as the show continues for you to be able to kind of pace things out. And in universe, it's malleable timing anyway. You know, months can go by in a day, just due to the nature of how the show functions. So arguably, a lot of stuff all happens like on the same day. But what that day is constantly shifting due to the temporal distortions. But the idea is that year 2 was at least intended to be unfolding more or less at pace with the release of the episodes of Super Megaforce that were being covered. With the idea that the year 2 finale was supposed to happen in November of 2014, and then the year 3 finale, or not the year 3 finale, we're not there yet. The year 3 premiere was intended to take place shortly thereafter. But due to temporal distortions, that shortly thereafter went from being December of 2014 to suddenly December of 2015 with New Year's 2016. Oh, that's interesting. You realize you get your burger on a pancake tray. I don't eat burgers, so, or well, I don't eat hamburgers. I'll eat turkey burgers, but I just don't order burgers at McDonald's or anything. Also, yes, I was a knife salesman. When it's mentioned in back in year zero that database had sold knives to get money for Dr. K's violin, that was just based off the fact that I was a knife salesman at the time. Um, I basically stopped doing knife sales more or less around the same time that I started doing power reviews. Technically speaking, I could still be selling them if I wanted to. The way that business model works is I was technically an independent contractor, technically still have like a sales code that I could use if I wanted to continue selling. Um, but I had reached a point where I needed to decide whether I was going to continue committing to that because they had offered me a promotion to my own office. I would have had to move to another state because I would be receiving my own district, and it was going to be off in Pennsylvania. And I realized that I didn't really want to pursue that as a career. After considering it, because I was doing very well within the their structure, their sales structure and their management structure. I was doing very well. The district manager, division managers, like regional managers, all liked me. Um, and I was it was direct sales, so I would go, I would make appointments, see people in their homes, and sell them knives, as well as other kitchenware. And I had decided that I wanted to start working on power reviews, and I wanted to try and find a more reliable source of income. While I was quite good with the knife sales, it was inducing a lot of anxiety because I didn't know from week to week, you know, what my hours may or may not be, whether I would have a sale or not, whether I would have appointments or not, and it was just always calling and having that sort of having that level of rejection sensitivity over the whole thing. So it was generating a fair amount of anxiety, um, and I wanted something that was going to be more reliable, and I ended up securing a temp job right around the same time I started Power Reviews. Like, basically, the first Halloween episode was like right before I started. So like the first 4 episodes, I was just still a knife salesman, and then episode 5, I think, was right around the time I got my my temp job in data entry at State Farm. So I was Jake at State Farm for like a year. Um, oh, how did I meet MJ? Oh, we met in college. We met in our college theater group. As I was mentioning, that the gurney um, that T Omega's strapped to was one that I obtained from our college theater, and that was the theater where we met. Um, but oh, hopefully you manage to secure the job at Target. Um, I think I actually applied to Target and didn't hear back from them back when I was first looking for work fresh out of college. I guess they saw that I was like a physics major and didn't think that I would be a good fit or something. I have no idea. They for all I know, they lost my application. I have no idea what the deal was with that. This was also like fall of 2009. I I I am genuinely convinced that during the time when I was struggling to find work, back before I started doing power reviews, I'm genuinely convinced that a big part of things was just that nobody believed my resume was real. I never got that feedback, but that was sort of the conclusion I came to after a while, because my resume is ridiculous, especially back then, because it looks like it's like a backwards progression, because I think at the time it was like, oh, I on my resume is I was working at the school bookstore, and before that, I was like a assistant groundskeeper at for like a summer, and I had an internship at Nickelodeon working on a Nicktoon, Tack and the Power of Juju, and then before that, I had a research assistantship where I was studying Type 1A supernova, and before that, I had an internship at a pharmaceutical company working on a weight loss drug, and before that, I had an internship at New York Medical College doing melanoma cancer research as a high schooler. So obviously, anyone, handing that resume in at a retail HR department or whatever to try and get a job, that's going to look like a fake resume. Like, I did research in 3 different scientific fields and an animation internship at Nickelodeon. And I also worked retail and was a groundskeeper and a knife salesman and all that. And that just makes no sense as a person. I do not make sense as a believable person. In terms of, not that I seem untrustworthy, but just, my life just doesn't seem like you would believe that that's a real life that actually exists. Yeah, I went through, like, a lot of it was internships when I was in college, which, internships are temporary. But it took me forever to find permanent, like, stable employment. It was very frustrating. And part of that was just I graduated at, like, the worst time since the Great Depression. I graduated in fall of 2009. Fall of 2008, right after the stock market crash. And then I couldn't find stable employment. I was doing I was a theater tech for a bit of time there. Oh yeah, the animation internship at Nickelodeon. I worked on Tack and the Power of Juju. That was the summer in between me getting my physics degree and starting physics grad school, while I was still also working on my electronic media arts and communications degree. Um, I had an internship at Red Eye Filmworks, which I worked there for 8 weeks, and I believe they existed for 12 weeks. They had been contracted by Nickelodeon because they wanted to bring animation services back to the States instead of Korea. And unfortunately, Red Eye had set up with another group, I think it was called Digital Film Tree, to do their lighting and rendering with them and then eventually move into their space. And Digital Film Tree completely fell through on having the machines they needed for all the lighting and rendering. So that put them behind schedule, and so they weren't able to successfully hit the terms of the contract established with Nickelodeon, and so Nickelodeon terminated the contract after just working on 1 episode. So I worked on they were working on other episodes in parallel, but only 1 episode actually was completed by Red Eye, and I worked on that 1 episode. So I worked on the only episode of Tack and the Power of Juju that was actually animated in the United States and not Korea. It was what was it? The Tooth Hurts, I believe. If I'm recalling the title correctly, it was a Halloween episode where a magic spell created a horde of undead teeth who were destroyed by candy, because candy kills teeth. It was hilarious to work on. That was a delightful summer. But yeah, my life is weird. My life is very weird. It's relatively uneventful during the times in between it being really weird. Like, this week I've just been sitting in my apartment working on my computer for good chunk of that. But yeah, my life is weird. Did I hear about Blue Sky? I know that um, Disney bought Fox, which owned Blue Sky. So I assume that Blue Sky is in the process of being dismantled because Disney. Um, but yeah, I didn't get a full time job like a real full time job with benefits as opposed to a temp job. I didn't get a full time job until I was 30 when I got my first teaching job. That was my first actual full time job with benefits. Prior to that, I'd been a temp for years. Um, because if they have you as a temp, like they'll say temp to hire and then just never get around to hiring you. It happened at State Farm. I was there for a year and a half, and then it happened again when I was working for the state. Um, by the end of my term working with the state, I was doing the job of like 5 different people, and I was still a temp. I was just very good at my job, and people would leave and they wouldn't hire new people, and I would just take over their responsibilities. And I still had a lot of downtime to work on scripts, honestly. Um, so, so yeah, that job market's rough. Like I'm doing okay now. We're doing well now, but I mean, a big part of the reason that I was able to get my master's degree and that we're currently able to be looking for a house is due to the combination of, good support structure from our families and just living very frugally in general. Like, we don't really spend money on a lot of stuff. Like, I don't play video. I don't buy video games. I don't do any of the I don't smoke or drink or any of that I know can cost people a lot of money. Um, we don't go on a lot of trips outside of like our honeymoon and Power Morphicon. Um, yeah, it's we don't tend to spend on a lot of things that I think other people spend on. Even within the Power Rangers fandom, I feel a little weird that I'm not more of a toy collector. I feel like I don't have space and I don't have disposable income, even though I'm probably in better condition than others. Um, and part of that is just I think leftover anxiety from having been in such a rough place employment wise for so long. Um, oh right, yeah. Another uh, Nimona was the last thing that they were working on with Blue Sky, and then it got rescued by another uh, studio. That's good. Oh right. Oh so yeah. So Diamond, you yeah that I forget how young some of you guys are. I mean, yeah, I know that it was tough getting through the tail end of 11th grade as the pandemic was kicking off because I was teaching 11th graders during that time, and I knew it was tough to like work with them remotely. Um, it's definitely it's been a really challenging couple of years. It's been there's this year is going to be very intensive for me. Um, but it's also just been an extremely intense last several years. Really, like the last decade in general has 20 years. Take your pick. Pretty much since the turn of the millennium, it feels like it's been nonstop. Um, like I was saying to a coworker the other day that I've been exhausted for approximately 20 years running, and I'm really looking forward to the series concluding because I think I might actually finally, after like the run from APs in high school, go working through an accelerated college program, doing grad school, searching for jobs, you know, doing grad school again, teaching, all that, this show, you know, getting married, first kid, house hunting, I feel like this winter break might be my first, like, real proper break in, like, forever. So it's intense. But I realize that it is starting to get a little late, and we have gone off on many tangents. And that's one of the things. If you start asking me questions about my life, I got stories forever. I feel like this whole like tangent started off with me just talking about Panini Press. Yeah, I know. The time these last 20 years have gone by fast. And it's just because so much has happened in the last like 20 years. Like not really in terms of I think technology like people thought it was going to be. Like, you know, we have obviously advances in the internet and in our internet devices, but apart from that, the world looks very the superficial world looks very similar to how it did 20 years ago. Like I wouldn't say style has changed that much, music hasn't changed that much, you know, architecture hasn't changed that much, cars haven't changed that much. All the things that, you know, you expect to look different in the future really don't. But sociopolitically, and in terms of just, you know, the economic environment, the social environment, that has changed so much in the last 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago, had anyone even heard of a meme? I don't know, and that's just now like a language that we all communicate in. But I could get off on far too many tangents. I've already done far too many of those for a relatively short episode. So let's wrap things up, and we can always continue more stories next time. But before we go, let's remember our remaining 3 equally non-controversial phrases. Number 1, say it with me, chat. Love is love. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Trans rights are human rights. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Robots are cool. Even when they're evil, they're sometimes, I think, pretty cool. They go on nice rants. Good dialogue. I enjoy it. I had so much fun playing evil in this episode, I cannot tell you. So, thank you again. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and don't forget to check out the newest Deeper Look and Rapid Run Through coming back this Sunday at 11 a.m. And until next time, farewell, Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.